Hello, my name is Ryan, and I just came up with 10 rules that I live by in the car. Uh, I've been fortunate enough to have over 10,000 five-star trips, a badge, and between Uber and Lyft, I'm at over 21,400 rides between both platforms, and I've been fortunate enough, besides probably 6 months of the 4 years, to have a 5.0 on both platforms on Uber and Lyft. And sometimes you just have to learn things the hard way, trial and error, or you know what it's like when you get a ride and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. I'm not going to say that again. But these are 10 different rules that I live by, and it's less about a strategy and what times to work or where to go. There's plenty of stuff out there, but it's just kind of my format of every single ride and kind of the outline of how I set things up. But the first thing, number one, is impressions. A clean car. It sounds pretty self-explanatory, but first impressions, whether you're meeting a person in the car or out and about in public or date night, whatever, it's the first 30 seconds, 45 seconds is probably the most important. They're looking at the vehicle, the cleanliness, how you greet them. I mean, there's a big difference between, hello and hey, how's it going? Or, you try read the room, but I always start off with a little more energy. But that first impression is beyond important, I believe. I always have waters in the door. I want to make sure everybody's taken care of. I make sure it smells nice. Every day I spray probably one pump of Acqua di Gio, Giorgio Armani. I've had a number of compliments, but I've had a number of people that have had complaints that they say, "Hey, this car smells really good." I've been in a car before in rideshare, and it didn't smell very good. Every little thing to build up that rapport and comfort, just I think can add and take away to what comes next. Having water in the car, I still have to make sure that you never want trash in the back. I've been surprised, or somebody grabs the water from the pocket and it's half full, or there's two sips out of it and it's gone, or else there's something on the seat that they left behind. After every single ride, without fail, I'll look behind me, and a couple times a week, there's always a phone or car keys, something, a vape, headphones. But it's so much easier to catch it right then, and just it's a bad feeling. I'm sure we've all been there in our personal life, or in a situation in a car with people, and it's like, oh, there's a phone. Or you've been in that situation where you're like, where's my phone? And I'll say a couple times a week, every, I don't know, a couple times every 100 rides, I get the phone call. Hey, I left did I leave this in there? Did I leave that in there? And I'll double check. I'll if I'm driving around, I'll stop, but I'll look. But it's just comforting to say, at every single ride, without fail, I look behind me to make sure there's nothing behind me. But anyway, that those first impressions, I think they mean more than we might give them credit to. And then there's things that can take away from that pretty fast. Number two is the ratings. You're trying to collect what information you can, and honestly, for what I see in the car, it's 4.75, 4.8 on Uber's average. On Lyft, it's like a 4.9. I think they get rid of your worst rating and they round up. But if I get a 5.0 on Lyft or a 4.9 on Uber, I tell them, hey, you have a solid rating. If it's a 4.98, I'll say, hey, you basically have a perfect rating. I appreciate you. You make my job easier. And it's true. I've had one complaint that I can think of in 18,300 rides on Uber, where the person got sick, and he had a good rating, and I still gave him a 2-star, and I gave him a half an hour free ride. But whatever information you can get, it's kind of a layup of a compliment as well. It's in the 3,100 rides on Lyft. Same thing. I haven't had one complaint with the 5.0. And sometimes people just sign up, but it's pretty easy. Where 2 nights ago, I picked up somebody who had 700 rides in a 5.0, and he's a bartender, service industry, same as us. And I just tell him, hey, you have 700 rides in a 5.0, killing it. Like, I appreciate you. You make my job easier. And it's kind of twofold. It's A, I truly appreciate them because I know what I'm getting into, and B, um, it's just a way to uh, give them a compliment, and then also they want to keep that higher rating. Like, that you kind of set the bar, the bar for them, that they're a good rider. And I just I've had great experiences. Nothing with the low rating. I don't call people out, uh, and I don't judge. I tell everybody, as long as you don't puke in my car, you get 5 stars. I don't want to be the judge. I tell them, I don't care who you voted for. Just tell me about your day. I don't want to judge or worry about them slamming the door, or with the little things that I can drop their rating down with. But I don't want them to think that they're walking on eggshells. So at the rating, it's something that I call it almost every high rating for, and never a low rating. Sometimes I drop off a low rating, and I'm thinking in my head, like, I know why you have a low rating. Sometimes I don't know. I get low ratings throughout the week, and they're wonderful people. Like, that's, I kind of live by, you'll be measured on the measurement you give others, and I stick with that. But I think it's kind of important, and it's, sometimes people take pride in it. Like, hey, I've had we had a work meeting and I had the highest rating, or I look at it and I'm proud of it, and as you should be. Like, there are people they're more punctual. There's there's just better experiences that I've had in the car. And again, nothing against the lower ratings. Sometimes somebody might send their drunk friend home, or whatever. It happens. But if it's people on a date night or something too, and I love being able to say that, because it makes them look good. Or if they're with colleagues, and there's two of their business partners or colleagues, and he or she has a high rating, I'll be like, hey, you have a good rating. I appreciate you. It makes them look good. So I look at those ratings. I think they help out. It just, what you're getting into more with the high ratings, and it's a way to, uh, for me, pay my respect for them for being a good client. Number three is know your audience and know who is paying. Whether you're picking somebody up at a hospital, a different location, what event's going on, what kind of event is happening. Any information you can get, trying to know your audience, I think, can be kind of a pivotal moment. At a hospital, I'm always careful. I'm not pulling up to a hospital, picking up somebody from the ER, being like, hey, how's your night going? I'm very cautious. I let them lead. Um, the age, if I'm at an old folks home, or assisted living, or retirement community, it's just a different vibe. Or if I'm at UW, the University of Washington, it's a younger clientele. Um, I try to pick up what pieces of information I can to give me a more favorable outcome, or just know what's worked for me in the past with who I'm dealing with. And then with who is paying, sometimes I get a group of people and everybody's throwing out songs before the ride, and I'll say, hey, Samantha, what song do you want to do? Or sometimes the drop off is a little chaotic. Hey, just go a little bit further. Hey, can you drop this person off at the grocery store, and then drop this. I always ask the person paying. I said, Bill, what do you want me to do? It's, we're in the service industry, and I want to know the audience, and I want to give them preferential treatment. When it comes to, I've had couples in a debate, or friends within a debate, and sometimes they want you to be a mediator. Whose side do you think is right? And sometimes it's kind of a joke, but it's like, I'm on Bill's side. I have to be. Bill's paying. Even if you throw in a couple jokes after that. I think it's important to know the audience and who's paying. I always want to make them feel more special and they get what they want, because if they're getting left behind in the car and they're the ones that are paying, the tipping, and I don't care if they don't tip, but they're the ones that uh, they're the one in control. That's the service they're paying for. And I tell them, if it's somebody by themselves, if you want to debate, you win. I don't care. I had a person that was trying to tell me the Seattle traffic is way worse than uh, than the Seattle traffic is way worse than LA, and bigger fish to fry. I know that's not to be the case on average, and I just said you're right. I didn't tell her I didn't care, but I didn't care, and she said it again. Seattle only has two bridges, and I said okay, you're right. And the person next to her was kind of challenging her a little bit, but if you want to debate, you win. There's no instance where can win anything. I have my own thoughts, but I just have respect for people. And if you wanna try to debate me, I have bigger things to worry about, and I know I risk the chances of offending somebody and a complete stranger that I know very little about. I had a I had a guy that I picked up that was visiting here from London, and he was going to Microsoft for the first time. He was in America for the first time, and he said his ride the night before from SeaTac, the airport, all the way to Redmond, it was like a 40-minute ride. The driver had been complaining about both sides of the political aisle and just complaining the entire ride back. And I just felt so bad for him, because he was excited to be here. He was excited to be in the United States, in Seattle, in Microsoft campus for the first time. And this guy was just no hope in sight, just complaining. It was like a trauma dump. Imagine going to Paris and, the taxi picking you up, and all of a sudden he or she wants to tell you all about the parliament and all the problems there. It's futile. I try to give a message of hope, or something positive. I always try to drop people off in a better mood than when I picked them up. As far as the clientele here too, whether depends on where I'm picking people up. You have a pretty good idea if they're Amazon or Meta, Facebook. It's Google. You try to know the locations where you're picking people up. If it's a Friday night, and they're off from work, there's a little more excitement. As far as culturally too, there's people from all over the world. I pick up people from most countries, and for this example, I mean, people from India. I've asked them a number of their favorite spots. South Goa, Ladakh, Kashmir, Shillong. I've learned about arranged marriages. Sometimes it's a Friday night, and I try to relate to them, and sometimes it's just about breaking the ice and be like, hey, you're gonna party like you're in South Goa. I've seen pictures of there, but all those places that I've looked up, I've been to 40 some states. I try correlate it with places I've been. Like South Goa kind of reminds me of adult spring break, like Key West. And if it's a Friday night and I'm like, hey, you guys gonna party like you're in Goa tonight? Hey, how do you know about Goa? There's an instant rapport, and then I'll say more about the things that I've learned, and then sometimes it's like, hey, have you been there? Have you been to India? Sometimes I'll lie right away and be like, oh yeah, totally. But then I value honesty over everything else in the car, and I'll be honest. No, I've never been there, but I've learned about it. But it just it opens the door for more conversation, and usually a lot of times that 10-minute ride is going to be like 1 minute, and you're going to have fun, and they're going to start asking other questions. But you can do that with wherever you're at or whoever you're with. But I enjoy that. I've had a lot of fun with that. Number 4, good questions. Be prepared to listen. There's a number of questions I do enjoy asking in the car. After breaking the ice and finding more about them. A few that I've used in the past is there any favorite hobby or thing you like to do when you're not working? A lot of people are active, or they're gamers, or they're artists. They love talking about their passions. If they're big readers, being through almost 100 audiobooks, I'll be like, hey, what's your favorite book, nonfiction? If I'm trying to learn something, or your favorite book and why? Is there any nuggets that you learned out of there? Is there any best lesson you've learned along the way to get to where you're at? People like to share the knowledge that they have, or how they got to where they're at. Even on a more personal level, I've asked, what's the best advice you've ever received from a parent? And I've had some great answers in that realm too. All these good questions, but I had two girls in the back, and I'd ask them I'd ask them what was one of their favorite things they ever learned from their parent, or lessons they learned from their parent. And I can't remember what the first girl said. And we came up to stopping, and I was about to drop them off. And then I asked the girl behind me, and I said, hey, did you have something you wanted to say? And you could just tell she couldn't wait. She's like, yeah, I had something I really wanted to tell you. And she said, you're going to be 30 years old, and you'll either have done it or not done it. You'll be either 40 years old, or you have done it or not done it. And you can be 50 years old, or you have done it or have not done it. And I just love that. I've heard it spun a lot of different ways as far as a similar advice, but coming from her, early 20s, and the fact that it meant something from her dad, that she thought about it and she couldn't wait to tell and share. I enjoyed that moment. I enjoyed the wisdom, and just the connection that she was willing to share what her dad taught her. It's sometimes in the rides, or there people bring up their cats, their dogs, their kids. I always ask for more information. I enjoy pets. I have a 4-year-old. We do a lot of fun different things, and people like to talk about their kids, their animals. And I open that door. I ask them more good questions in regards to them, or I ask them, is there one quality that you put at the top of your list when your kids were growing up, even if their kids were flown the nest, or they're teenagers, when you're younger, what did you push in your house? Like, what was it, one of the top qualities that you guys valued? And I've heard some wonderful responses there, and you can tell it comes from the heart. It meant a lot to them, and it's something that they want to instill that on the next generation. And I enjoy questions with some substance sometimes, because you'd be surprised what you get. But it's just good questions, and being prepared to listen. It's just sometimes I just let them go, and just enjoy them and talking about it. And I'm more of an introvert, but I enjoy the connection. Sometimes when it's too chaotic, I feel my energy dwindling. And when I get rides that there's connection, it's just, you blink and it's over, and it's like, oh man, see you later. Number 5, we're in the service industry. I tried to add value anywhere that I can. I try to go above and beyond. It's not about you, it's about them. And from the moment you're picking somebody up, again, I said I want to leave them in a better mood, but I can tell that sometimes you're picking somebody up, and they have the 7 pieces of groceries, and they might have a lower rating, and they're going 5 minutes. You're going to spend more time putting the groceries in the car almost and dropping them off than you are in the actual ride. But that's an opportunity for me that I do to help out. Sometimes you get elderly, or one lady, 2 months ago, I went up 2 flights of stairs on the outside of her house, and I loved it. It got me out of the car, and I grabbed 4 pieces of groceries, and it was quick and easy, and she was very thankful. And if I can give back, it it just helps the scenario. But it's the value you can bring to others. It's not about you. Whether it be somebody's birthday, I'll ask the person whose birthday it is. Do you have a birthday song? There's something you want to listen to? Um, Anniversary, airport luggage. It's whether you're picking up somebody and you're grabbing their luggage. I try to beat them to the spot, or at the airport. I'm out there waiting by the trunk with it open. I don't know how many times I've seen somebody just a couple days ago. The person's knocking on the Uber's window, being like, "Hey, can you help? Is this you?" And I'm sure there was a stall number sent, but you know, or they're trying to figure out how to open up the latch on the back of the vehicle. If it's that, back to that first impression, I want them to be comfortable. I want them to be like, "Hey, is this Frank?" And less confusion, or less chaotic. When they don't know how to open up the back of the trunk. I think that's an opportunity to do a little bit more. And then when I'm picking people up, the Tesla handle can be a little funky. So every time people are getting in, I look at the door and make sure that they're not fumbling. And I know pretty quick if they've opened up a Tesla door or not. And I had to learn it too. We all had to start somewhere. But any value that I can add, and less confusion along the way, I think helps me out, and it's going a little bit above and beyond. Um, Teslas don't have a spare tire. I have the air compressor, and then I have the tire kit. If there's a nail or something, I can fix it real quick. Even my 4-year-old, he's seen it done a few times. But I remember being in there was a Subaru in front of us, and we were at the grocery store, and they had a flat tire. And every time we have ability to help somebody out, around him, or personally, I ask when I'm with him. I always ask him, "Hey, should we help him out?" And he's like, "Yeah." I mean, he's to the point where he already knows how to turn the air compressor on, and once I find the nail or the screw, I'll ask him, "Do you see it?" He's held the flashlight before, but I've probably fixed 20 different tires while I was working. And then I have a jump starter, so if somebody has a dead battery, it takes me 2 minutes to jump their car. If I don't get a fare, or I lose that ride, so be it. And then with the plugging the tire, it takes like 5 minutes. It's in and out. But it's, if I can go above and beyond, if there's an opportunity for me to do more, I have rules in the car. I have to help out. Number 6, legit and honest compliments. if I had a couple that 2 nights ago, they were going on their 20-year anniversary. And if I get anniversaries in the car, if somebody said, "Hey, we've been together 25 years," I always say 10 years in the car, that's platinum status. I if I have a grandparents in the car and they have grandchildren, they're talking about their grandchildren, I call that a promotion. I think it's a promotion to have grandchildren. Like it's an easy compliment, and it's truly a blessing for those that have it. Anniversaries, I'll ask them how they meet. How did your two worlds collide? Like they usually enjoy telling that story, and I always love hearing about it. Um, yeah, if somebody got a promotion at work, I've told people before in the car, every day I try to look for reasons to have more faith in humanity. And when I get good news, whether it be anniversary or birthday or wedding or something like that, it's just a reason to celebrate, and it's a reason to call them out and be like, "Hey, congratulations!" Right? A person, they got the job after 5 years of wanting the job desperately. It was like their dream job, and I was so proud of her. Just trudging along, going after what she really wanted. It has to be honest, though. I mean, people, I think, can feel if you're being shallow, or not very genuine and sincere. Um, there was Saturday night, 3 nights ago, 2 nights ago, I picked up a student from UW, and his profile picture in in his Lyft account. I mean, it was like one of the most professional pictures I've seen. He looked like he worked for a Fortune 500 company. Like it was just, it was solid. And when I got in the car, he was just very articulate, and it kind of commanded the space. You could tell he was used to dealing with people. And I brought up the picture, and he said that he does photography on the side, and he does different gigs that people pay him for. And I gave him two different compliments. I said, it looks like you're a Fortune 500 company. Like, it was a solid picture. It looks so professional. And then just maybe once a month I'll get somebody in the car, and it's just every word is just so articulate. And I said, you're very articulate and punctual with your words. Like, it's very relaxing. We all have our different accents, and I mumble too. But when it was just spot on with it. There was no thinking. It was so relaxing, and I loved giving it. Hey, you're very punctual and spot on with your words, articulate. You know, Anytime I can give a compliment. Now there's this is a while back, but I picked up this girl, and she told me that she's with her boyfriend, but this one of the drivers told her that she was like stunningly beautiful, and she said she was so excited she gave him a $20 tip. And I was thinking about that for like a minute. I've four sisters. I tried to take care of the girls in the car, but I would never give a. I just feel like that was kind of an inappropriate compliment. I would never go there with somebody with something like that in the car. As far as a feature, it's more just a genuine compliment of the people that I deal with. Number 7, live by your mirrors. It might sound a little bit silly, but almost I've 21,400 rides, and there's probably, I don't know, 5 different times I could have totaled my car if I didn't blow out a stoplight or floor it. Especially when the bars are closing, there's always people racing around or people not paying attention. I'm always looking at my mirrors. If I'm at a stoplight downtown Seattle, chances are I'm peeking in the rearview mirror, looking at the cars behind me and seeing how fast they're coming. If there's a car that's beat up, growing up, we always called it a hoopty. I feel I have to be more cautious around that car. I know where it's at. I'm looking in my mirrors to watch where they're at in the roads. But it's just about knowing who's around you, and especially at a stop light, you're just more vulnerable. I mean, there was one time where I was in Dexter and Mercer intersection I was just at 2 minutes ago. I came back to it, and there was 3 cars piled up. Sometimes there's things you can control and there's things that you can't, but the mirrors are something that I live by. Number 8, mistakes will happen. Own them. Own the mistakes. When I first newer to the area, I've been in Seattle I've been doing this for 4 years. I had to learn different areas of Seattle, and I still make mistakes. But one thing I learned shortly on, if I took a wrong turn or something, I'll tell people immediately, hey, I just want to spend more time with you. It's a joke. They know that I'm messing around, but I'll own up to it. It's mistakes are inevitable. We're all going to make them, especially in the beginning. I mean, everybody starts a job. There's confusion. There's a learning curve. But if you can hold your own and not get anxious or anxiety and throw a joke in there, it kind of takes some of that. I don't know, the bitterness out of the situation. But I think it can be pretty powerful. Number 9 is when I drop off, I always ask religiously, every person I ever drop off, I always ask them, is this a good spot? Unless it's like beyond obvious. But I always ask them, even if it's the front of a grocery store, hey, is this a good spot for you? Is this a good spot for you? I just want them to be the ones that that tell me. Usually it's pretty close, or sometimes they might deviate a little bit. But the last thing I want is a lower rating or unhappy customer because some people they wanted to be 200 feet off or a couple cars up. I just always ask them, and if they're traveling, I might say, does this look familiar? Is this, whether you're dealing with Airbnb or something, I just I want them to get to the right spot. But I think it's just standard that every single ride I say, I always ask them, is this a good spot? And number 10 is be kind, courteous, and respectful. Being kind, courteous, and respectful, and something I'll add to that is just cautious. I'm more cautious about the lower ratings. Two things I say is hurt people, and the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. Sometimes I know I'm dealing with unhappy people or they're just not in a good spot, but I just try to show kindness, courteous, and be respectful at all times. Not pushing the envelope, not pushing an agenda. It's their ride, and I'm just the transporter. But being cautious can go a long way. Especially for me when I'm dealing with the lower ratings sometimes. And sometimes when they're complaining enough, I might just mirror them and just start complaining too. It might make it easier for me. But anyway, that sums up the 10 rules that I kind of live by. I mean, there's always more I could say or different examples, but it's what I try to stick to, and I've been fortunate along the way, and proud that I have 10,000 five-star rides, and I've also been blessed. I've just had some good people, and I just had some good scenarios. Keep on going, but never know. Tomorrow they could change that. As far as the 5-star ratings, you never know what you're gonna get into. Anyway, cheers.